evening, folks. In the council study session,
Well, thank you so much for coming tonight. I know it's been a horrific last few days for all of us. I think I measured about 13 1/4 inches of rain at my house. I remember the phone ringing. It was about 2:55 at night. First it was my hardline phone, and I couldn't get to it in time. And then it was my council phone, and then it was my personal phone. And finally, I picked up, and Harold told me that we needed to make an emergency declaration and start evacuating people along the river corridor. I was just really amazed at how the city pulled together, and they're going to give you the details about what all happened. And anyway, I would like to start by introducing our city's council team. We have Councilmember Brian Bagley, Councilmember Bonnie Finley, Councilmember Katie Witt, Councilmember Alex Samori, Councilmember Gabe Santos, and Councilmember Sarah Levison. And boy, we sure worked together, and we worked hard. It's events like this that bring a city together. And even though I think we're all had a great working relationship, when you have to work on something as important as this, it's just amazing how a team can come together. And I think that's the silver lining in something like this. Is I think the greatness of this city is the goodness of the people, and I think that really came out in the last few days. So I also want to introduce our city manager, Harold Dominguez, and our emergency operations manager, Dan Eman, and our city public works, Dale Rademacher, who kind of makes everything in all the infrastructure, the water, sewer, all that stuff all works. And I also like to thank all the community volunteers and all the donation, and I really like to thank the city staff for all the hours that they put in. I mean, I would see people there when I left at night, and then come in the next morning, and they'd still be there. I don't know when they slept, but everybody worked a lot of shifts and a lot of hard hours. So I guess now I'll just turn it over to Harold, who will walk you through exactly what happened and where we go from here.
Thanks, Mayor. So it has been a very busy last 4 days. I think when we all went home from work on Wednesday afternoon, we didn't think that we were still going to be working through the weekend. When this started, if you can look at this graph, and I don't know if they have that up yet. There we go. The National Weather Service has said that this was a rainfall of biblical proportions, and it really was. If you look at the graph, in terms of the discharge that we were seeing, it hits pretty high in the graph. To let you know kind of what was happening Wednesday night, at about 11:50 midnight, I actually received a call from Dale, and he was saying we need to watch the gauges because the rainfall, this is going to be problematic. From that point on, we had probably a half a dozen phone calls. Some of those, it was a conference call between Dale and Dan regarding the what we need to do as we were moving through it. One of the problems that we actually had when this event started was that when we were looking at the gauges that we would normally utilize to monitor the water flow, they started reading an error message. And so we weren't actually able to see how many cubic feet per second were moving through the river. And during that time, then we had to start taking the gauge height. And Dale and I believe his wife were actually doing engineering, pen and paper engineering, figuring out the flow, and we realized very quickly that the flow was in the neighborhood of in excess of probably 9,000 to 10,000 acre feet at that time. And it was at that point where we decided to bring up the emergency operations system and actually begin evacuations. And you can see the timeline as we move through it. We activated at 2:30. At 3 o'clock, the first of several evacuation notices were sent. As the mayor indicated, at that time I was starting to make calls to the city council members, letting them know what was going on. I will tell you that's not a call that you want to make, but they responded immediately and it said, you all do what you need to do and we're here to support you. So I would like to say that I really want to thank the council for their support as we move through the process. At 11 a.m., I declared an emergency as authorized by the city charter, and by the end of the day, we had an average of 9 inches of rain in Boulder County. The issue that we were really facing was not the rain that was falling on us. It was actually the rain that had been falling in the mountains and moving through the mountains. And it was a moving target for us at times. When we came in the morning, we were still watching various areas, and we actually asked some police officers to stage themselves at 75th on the river. And we were saying when we see the river start rising at that point, we need to know so we can notify our personnel that are conducting the evacuations. We actually didn't see a rise for a while. During that discussion, Dale indicated it may have busted the channel west of there, and what we're probably seeing is it's starting to spread out. Sure enough, we asked some law enforcement officers to check it out, and it had already jumped the channel. And so it was filling up another area of that basin. And so we were trying to manage it at that point because it was something that we haven't seen. It was frankly something that I don't think had been projected as we look at this. So I'm going to walk you through the flooding event basically from west to east. And so this is an area where the St. Vrain is actually coming out of Lyons and moving toward Longmont. And one of the biggest issues we had with this flooding, with this flood system, is that as it was leaving Lyons and it was moving around, it was busting through its original banks. And so what we were having to deal with in the process and trying to assess is that we fundamentally now had two rivers that was flowing into Longmont, and one was moving into a new channel, and that was something that eventually we saw flow into the greens in the area along Airport Road. And as you can see, I believe these pictures may have been taken the first day. I'm looking at Sean, first or second day. And so this gives you a good representation. As we continue to follow in where we see it, where it's reaching 75th Street and the gravel ponds, what really started happening is when it breached, then it started following the gravel ponds as it continued to move east. And that provided another issue for us because it was picking up more water as we were moving through and adding to what existed in the gravel ponds, and there were several that breached in this process. The next slide, you can see there were multiple ponds that were breaking, and so it continued to help the river move and change course as we were going through this. There were actually sections, and I don't know if you can see it on this, as we conducted several flight operations over the area, there were actually sections of the St. Vrain River that were completely dry from when the breaches went around it. The river then crossed Airport Road, and this increase at Airport Road was pretty quick. What I can tell you is we went out to fly in a helicopter, and we actually made it to the airport with some ease. It had already crossed, but then by the time we were trying to leave, it was almost impossible for us to get back as we were heading back to the emergency operation system. Golden Ponds actually overflowed, and so what we ended up seeing in this system is that we had two flows in the river, the one from Golden Ponds into the river, and then we had that flow where it actually had breached the river, and it was moving in through a different path, and it went through the greens, and it was flowing on the other side of the railroad tracks. So we actually had two significant flows coming in, and then it was actually on the other side of that storage facility where it eventually jumped back into the river. I want to point something out on this screen, and I think one of the things as we talk about this event in general, there was a lot of work that has been done in preparation for a flooding event. Granted, the work that we did was actually focused on a 100-year event. We can't say that this is a 500-year event, but I think we can say that it was probably in the neighborhood of a 200 to 250-year event. And so we did a lot of work. If you can notice at the bottom of this slide where you can see the dark-colored ponds where it looks normal based on what you would see if you were utilizing a Google Earth image, and then you see the brown-colored ponds on the other side. What's between that is Likens Gulch, and that was a big project that the city went through, and actually without that project being completed, what we probably would have seen is the water continue to then go onto those other series of ponds and create and just exacerbate the flooding we were going through. So what you're going to see in this a lot is you're going to hear me talk about a lot of planning that was done, a lot of projects that they went through that actually put us in a better position, and without that, the situation could have been much worse. So then we hit Sunset in Boston, and this is where the area we started flooding some large commercial areas. The water was moving through with some pace. One of the things that I want to say is throughout this event, I saw city staff perform amazing feats as they were going through this. One of the things that I want to bring up at this point was actually the call to evacuate and the recommendation that Dan and Dale made in this process. Without the recommendation at that point, it took us about 3 hours to evacuate this area that we're looking at. We were actually finished by the time we started seeing some of the other flows come in and hit other neighborhoods. Had they not have made the recommendation when they did, we actually would have been forced to be in a situation where we're evacuating multiple neighborhoods at once, and we're really stretching our personnel thin. In this case, we were finishing and we could move the personnel over, and it really allowed us to get things done very quickly. And so this was one point where we saw some amazing initiative from staff. Throughout all of this, our public safety personnel were amazing, and you'll see some of the numbers in terms of their rescues. So then we move into the industrial, you can see the industrial and residential areas. And then we start crossing Main Street with the flooding. I don't know if we ever thought we would see water move like this and do what it did in this area. It basically existed from the railroad tracks to, I'm not sure what the south boundary was because it was hard to make it over there, but it extended to the south quite a bit. And then we get into the area of the Pavlakis open space and the wastewater treatment plant. Again, this was something that we probably didn't really realize that it was going to get this high as we were moving through the process and as quickly. We'd looked at the maps, but what we ended up having to deal with at the wastewater treatment plant was that the water eventually came over and we had to shut the plant down in that process. What was amazing is that the process they went through to shut it down, and then we actually had to evacuate our own staff out of the area. When the water started receding and they went back, they actually were able to bring that plant up and running and were meeting permitting standards within 48 hours after the initial event hit. That is a monumental task, and I think you'll be hard-pressed to see any municipality and any wastewater treatment plant staff do that in that amount of time. It was amazing. And at the same time, they were managing the fact that we lost a sewer line crossing the river and rediverting that into some other locations so we could stop flowing sewage into the river. So just a tremendous amount of work. And then you can see where we hit 119 in the bridge over the St. Vrain. Again, want to kind of point out this was, again, a project that the city worked on, and it actually was handling all that water through the process. And that was critical because that, at one point, I think may have been the only way that we actually had to get to the other side of town during this process. And then you see the southern section at Sandstone Ranch and where the district park's starting to flood. Again, another issue, it's an awe-inspiring when you really see this and how the gravity of this flood. Here's where actually the St. Vrain and Boulder Creek come together. This area, as we flew over, there were just a number of issues that we were watching throughout this process. We lost County Line Road 1, and 119 became compromised, and there was a tremendous amount of force of water that was moving through this area. And then this is looking west from I-25 along 119, and you can really get a sense as to just the gravity of the flood system that moved through here. Left-Hand Creek. So while we were dealing with the St. Vrain, when we started this process, it looked like this was going to be a St. Vrain issue only. All of a sudden, again, we were still having issues with the gauges, and we were getting information that the next thing we know is that the left hand is starting to go up. And then obviously what we had to deal with at the Southmore area in the flooding, and it came up very quickly as we were moving through this. Actually, we were out when it started rising, and folks were just trying to get people out of the area as the water was rising. Again, want to point out, you can see in the left-hand area that there's some projects that we recently completed. Had we not have completed these projects, the situation that we would have faced at the left-hand area would have been much worse, and it really would have taken us to capacity as we were dealing with this. So again, that planning and looking into the future, it was critical as we went through this process. Rescue efforts. I talked a little bit about the efforts that our folks went through, that our public safety folks went through. We had approximately 24 technical water rescues, and then we had over 200 water rescues in the process. At the same time, you know, obviously, when we go through a situation like this, this is a tragic event for a community, but we also understand that it is very, you know, the impact that it has on families as they move through this process, we can't imagine. And one of the things that we were trying to deal with at the same time was how do you handle pets in the process and pets that were left in their homes. We would have loved to have moved through much more quickly to deal with this issue. Unfortunately, 2 days in, we were still making water rescues, rescuing people from the system. So our perspective was we're going to deal with making the rescues first with people before we get into evacuating pets. We actually had 31 pets rescued. 38 pets were actually found and returned to their owners. And so we were trying to manage a number of different issues. Missing persons. There was a significant issue with missing persons as we were moving through this process. We had 70 people reported missing. We had 64 persons identified and located by city staff and city council. You know, obviously we would want to have all 70 located. We're continuing to work through that. But, you know, just great work by staff from across the organization, but especially staff from community services that work in the senior center and their dedication to move through this. We're going to continue evaluating what steps to take. One of the issues that we're having is that in a lot of cases what we're finding is that individuals may have been on trips. And eventually we get a call saying, well, I'm in Nebraska, or I think I heard one may have been in Canada. So we're still working through this, but I can say at this point we didn't have any injuries that were reported in this process, and we have not had anyone report a loss of life in this process. So we were incredibly lucky considering the magnitude of this event and what we had to go through. Before I turn it over to Dan to go over more specifics, I also want to thank the community for the work that they did in the process. I heard some amazing stories, but the one that comes to mind was Nick Wolfram, who's an engineer, was out along Missouri in the Southmore Park area, and Nick is a dedicated employee, and he's dedicated this community. And Nick was taken aback when he went in and we were getting ready to run crews through the street, and he looked up and there was an army of residents and volunteers with their snow shovels pushing the mud off of driveways and into the streets. You know, and that we saw that all over the community. I saw it for 4 days at any hour from city employees and the work that they did. You know, sometimes when we get into these disasters, public safety gets a lot of attention, and they deserve it because they did a lot of work in this process. But what I can say to the community is every bit of this organization was dedicated to taking us as a community through this as quickly as we can and make progress as fast as we can. And for those folks that weren't directly involved in the initiative with our organization, they were actually what allowed us to focus on it. You may not realize this, but on Thursday when we activated the OC, we still had sanitation trucks running and collecting trash. They were doing a great job, and they let us focus on what we need to focus, and they kept everything going. I am extremely proud to be a new resident of this community. I'm proud to work alongside each and every one of you, and I'm proud to work with the staff. Amazing work, and they made my job so much easier. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dan, and he'll go over more details. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, my name's Dan Eaman. I'm the emergency manager for the city, and it's been an interesting few days. You know, in emergency management, we kind of like to think that we plan for the worst, and I think on this one we almost kind of missed it. This was an event that we never really dreamed would happen. We went through a really comprehensive flood planning effort a few years ago. We visited residents along the creek bed and visited every home in the area and tried to encourage signing up for the Everbridge system, which is what Harold mentioned that we use the reverse 911 system for. And we did a lot of planning based on the 100 and 500 year floodplain. Well, the good news was we did a lot of planning. The bad news was the river decided it was not going to follow the 100 and 500 year floodplain. It caused us some significant issues when we were getting reports from the field of, it's in Twin Peaks, it's in Champion, it's in Greens, and we kind of just, it was an amazing thing to watch. And as I see some of these pictures, it's kind of, it's shocking to me because my world was, 4 walls and we didn't get out much for a few days. So it's kind of the first time I've seen some of this, and I've lived here for a long time, and it's a humbling event. Sheltering. We at our peak we were managing 3 shelters. We had some interesting things go on with our shelters. Our main city shelter is at the Memorial Building, and it is staffed. Unlike a lot of communities, we staff our shelters with community services personnel. They're our employees. I believe that nobody takes better care of our people than our employees, and they were unbelievable during this event. They took care of people. They were unbelievably caring. They worked all night. They came in whenever they needed to, and it was an amazing thing to see. We opened the Memorial Building almost immediately. As soon as that Everbridge call went out, we knew that we were going to be asking people to leave their homes, and we needed to have some place for them to go. So we sent out another notification to city staff saying we need that Memorial Building open, and they had the doors open in 15, 20 minutes, and people were arriving. At the peak, I think we had nearly 200 people in that shelter. At the peak, I believe there was 150, 160 of them residing overnight. We never planned that it would be that many. It was something that we had to adjust to on the fly, and again, staff was unbelievable in those areas. We also decided as things started to pop up in the south, we needed a southern location, so we opened up the rec center, which was great until the floodwater started impinging on the rec center. So we had to move the shelter again down to Silver Creek High School. The St. Vrain School District was extremely open in this event. They gave us buses whenever we needed them. They offered to open whatever schools we needed for shelters. They were an incredible partner. So the good news was we got to open up that one. The bad news was the water started to rise down there. We ended up moving that shelter again. So we unfortunately had to move people in some cases 3 times to get them to the point where we finally had a shelter down at Niwot High School. Here's some approximate counts. You can kind of see that things are stabilizing a little bit as we're allowing people back into their homes. Obviously, the sheltering numbers are decreasing. The shelter is open tonight, and we will keep it open as long as we need to, as long as people need a place to be. Road closures and evacuations, just a little bit about this before I get into the graphs. This was an unbelievably dynamic process. Basically, the way this happened is as the river was doing things we didn't really know it was going to do, there were neighborhoods that needed to be evacuated, and public safety staff was just unbelievable in this process as they went into areas where the water was rising just to make sure people got out, make sure we were notifying people. They were running around like crazy. There were times when they couldn't get there from here, and they did everything they could to try to get to the people that needed them. It was incredibly selfless work. Both the police and fire departments were just unbelievable in this process in their efforts to get people out. And I think that's resulted in the most proud statistic I think I could ever mention in an incident, which is at this point 0 deaths, 0 injuries. And I think at the beginning of this, if you were to tell me that we were going to experience an event that, in my opinion, is near a 500-year flood event and we had no injuries and no deaths, frankly, nothing else matters to me. We had to coordinate with public safety and public works, obviously, on this because we get a lot of calls saying it's flooding in my neighborhood. Well, what does that really mean? We have to get people on site. We have to see, is it, you're seeing an inch of water? Is this 6 feet of water? One of the stories that I remember is some people sitting in their home. it's raining, they're not getting any of the notifications, they're watching things that are going on, and then the doors and the windows break down with water, and the flood is in their living room right now. That's how quick it happened to some of these people, and we did everything we could to get those people out safely. Public Works was incredibly valuable, going out, identifying roadways that weren't passable, measuring stream flow, monitoring bridges, making sure our people could get where they needed to go so the public safety could get in there and evacuate, and then we needed to close off access after that. This is a picture of the police operations as things were going on. They have a whole section of our emergency operations center, and that place was humming. I mean, it was nonstop for a couple of days as new reports came in. The left hand started rising, the St. Vrain was going. We had isolated flooding from just local rainfall yesterday. So it was a citywide event, but these guys were unbelievable in their dedication. Public information, especially in the day and age that we're in, where everybody's on social media, everybody is tweeting. This is a number one priority for emergency management, is to make sure we're communicating with the citizens as to what's going on. At times up in the EOC, we had 4, 5, 6 people working public information, people dedicated just to Facebook, just to tweeting, updating the website, and one of the things I think I've been complimented on the most as people have been talking and emailing is the quality and timeliness of information that we gave to the public, and that's something we took great pride in, and we hope that we met your expectations on that. But we were talking to news outlets, updating that website as much as we possibly could, maps, everything. They were 24/7. They're still there right now. We'll shut down when we need to, but we know that information is critical to everybody. We had so much traffic on our website that we crashed it. We had to do all kinds of pretty technical stuff to get another one up and running as fast as we could. 13,000 views a day, 86,000 total Facebook reaches. I'm not quite sure what that means, but I'm sure somebody will tell me after this, but it sounds high. They were in, I think that the second line down there's one of the ones I'm most proud of. We were up and running at about 2 o'clock. The Emergency Operations Center was open at 3 o'clock in the morning. We had a dedicated website and a Facebook page at 3:15 in the morning. Obviously, this was an interesting event from the media's perspective. Kind of our lead field PIO was Commander Jeff Satter, and he did an incredible job looking great on camera. Never saying dumb things like I'm kind of prone to do, so he did a fantastic job in front of the media. Road closures went up and down as we followed the event. There's still some roads closed out there right now, and for the most updated information, just check the website. But we were chasing these all the time, and these were all based on public safety. These were based on places that we did not want people to go back into because it was unsafe. That's the only reason we do these evacs and road closures. It's a public safety deal, and we realized that people were inconvenienced and people want to get back into their homes, but one of the things that we take really seriously, especially in public safety, is making sure people are safe, and that's what all of these road closures and evacs are based on. So that's Hover and Rogers Road prior to closure. There were any number of these intersections throughout the city. Another interesting thing we have going on in the emergency operations is our citizen call center. Before we put this in, kind of the only number that the citizens knew to call the city was 911 when things were going on. And the whole intent of this call center is to keep that 911 center open for true emergencies because, believe it or not, while this flood was going on, it was business as usual in other parts of the city. There were still EMS calls for service, people needed ambulance transport, people needed emergency police help, and we needed to keep that 911 center up and running for just emergencies. We got that sucker up and running around 3:30 also, and what these call center people are volunteers and employees from other parts of the city, people from the museum, utility billing, community services, every part of the city came in and helped and sat down and answered phones. I think I saw every one of our council members sitting in there answering phones at one time. This was just people that I want to help. They were there 24/7. And at one time, I think we had 15 phones all going at once, and they were call to call to call to call nonstop. It was incredible. And these were the front lines for the community. These were the people answering the phone when you were calling for information, and they were unbelievable. And I think you see at the bottom there, that's 10,000 calls that they answered since we opened that thing up. One of the things I want to talk about really quickly is recovery. Now that we're fairly certain, I've been wrong when I've said that before, that we're not going to get a whole lot of rain, we think we're moving past the life safety event into the recovery effort. And really what that is the work is really just beginning, especially for city staff. This recovery operation is really a big partnership between the city, the county, the state, and FEMA, and a whole lot of other acronymed agencies. And what we try to do at the city is make sure that we are providing access to every bit of assistance that you need. We had a visit from the governor today, and he pledged that as fast as we need it, as much as we need it, he'll find every little pot of money that we need, and will make every bit of assistance that he can available to us. He's already talking to the federal government. The state has been incredible in this process. Our local elected officials, our city council has been wonderful in this process. One of the things that emergency managers fear the most is when city council members enter the emergency operations center. They were all there, and I'll tell you one thing, I made several requests of them, and I never once heard no. All I heard was, what else can I do? And it was wonderful to see and be part of. Our state representatives, our federal representatives are getting involved now. They've all pledged their full support, and as a group, we are behind you as a community, and we're going to get every bit that we can for you. We've established a disaster recovery center at the Twin Peaks Mall. It's on the west side. It's in the old Stephen Barry's. We did have a little action there today. The official opening of that is Wednesday from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. At that point, we will have FEMA representatives there, we will have state representatives there, insurance companies, all sorts of things to help you through this process. They will be there tomorrow, but the full battery of assistance won't be available till Wednesday morning, and we will keep that open as long as you need it. There's a couple different kinds of assistance that FEMA offers you. I'm going to go over it really briefly, and I would be happy to spend time with anybody after this if they want more details. The staff at the Recovery Center is going to be available to assist you. It's been a long few days here. But the first thing that we really want you to do is get registered into the FEMA system. There are computers available at the Recovery Center. There are phones available. We can help you through this process. But it's 1-800-621-FEMA, or it's www.disasterassistance.gov. And what that's going to do, their program, they call it shared responsibility based on need. And the first thing they're going to go through is, what is your insurance company going to provide for you? If your insurance company can take care of you, it's kind of where the process stops. If your insurance company does not take care of you, if you do not have flood insurance or you're uninsured, then we kind of move on to step 2, where we start talking about uninsured losses. And the first place they're going to send you is the Small Business Association. And I want to be clear about this. Don't think it's just for businesses. The SBA actually has personal loan programs. So if you're asked to fill out an SBA loan, please do it. It's not a binding act. You can see what you're eligible for. They're very low interest rate loan programs. So if you do get through the process on your own and you see a Small Business Association loan form, that's not wrong. If you're looking for individual assistance, that's how the government wants you to go through this. It's based on your ability to pay. If you have ability to pay, you can go through the loan program. If you do not, then we get you into the FEMA grant program. Before I kind of wrap up here, we've had an enormous amount of outpouring of support from our community. I probably have eaten better in the last 5 days than I ever have. It's just been wonderful to see the community come together. And one of the stories I think one of our council members told me a little bit ago was about the Memorial Building shelter and how the surrounding neighborhood has kind of adopted the shelter. And people are going over, getting people's laundry, doing it in their home machines, kids going over with toys. It's been moving. Here's how you can help. Personal items, helpcoloradonow.com. If you want to donate money and you want to make sure it stays in our community, it's longmontfoundation.org. And with that, I will turn it over to Public Works Director Dale Rodemaker.
Thank you, Dan. So I'm going to step us through a little bit about some of the immediate projects that we've already got underway, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the long term. For the city's public infrastructure, I think the good news is that we have weathered through this fairly well. Certainly better than our neighboring community of Lyons, which frankly has been far more devastated even than what's happened here in Longmont. Not to say that the damage to our neighborhoods and to our homes has been substantial. So this is the photograph that Harold was referencing earlier. This is down in the Left-Hand Creek neighborhood in Southmore Park, and this to me is Longmont. This is Longmont out working, everybody with their shovels, their squeegees, anything they could find. And our direction to the contractors were, we work around these people because they are the ones that are out in their neighborhood doing work. And so with the cleanup, and there is an army of cleanup going on in this community right now. It's amazing when you go out into these impacted neighborhoods. We are bringing in large roll-off dumpsters into the neighborhoods. There are maps in the back. We have a couple hundred maps printed. They're also out on our website. And so those are being made available. And we've also trying to give instruction that to not put hazardous materials into those, things like paints and those kinds of things. Keep them separate. We will pick those up later. Keep those back on your property, out of the sidewalk and out of the right-of-way as best you can. So infrastructure, this is usually a boring thing, but when it really comes down to it, this is what allows us to all stay here in Longmont. It allows us to have water. So the city has been hurt pretty bad in the supply of raw water to our treatment facilities. We have always been very proud that we have a multitude of supply options, and thank God we do, because we've needed them all, because we're down to one. And it's still there, and it's still providing service. The water is safe. It has remained safe throughout this entire process, but we are down to one supply. And so as I go through this, we are going to ask citizens to stop all outdoor watering until further notice, until we can make sure that we have a good enough supply coming to the treatment plant for drinking. The ditch diversions along the St. Vrain, that's probably one of the saddest stories out there right now. Every irrigation ditch diversion on the St. Vrain is destroyed and gone. And what that means is that Longmont is not able to divert water to its parks and golf courses. But equally important is that all the farmers to the east of us and to the north of us and to the south of us will not be able to get water to their fields next year. And it's not just the St. Vrain Valley. It's the Thompson Valley, the Poudre Valley, the greater South Platte. It's a phenomenal, catastrophic issue in the agricultural community. Our water treatment plant has performed awesome. Our staff have done a heroic job of keeping it working. And we are fortunate that Longmont rebuilt our treatment plant back in 2005. Our South treatment plant, our awesome treatment plant that was built in 1934 is almost gone. Most of it fell into the river. And our new Nelson Flanders plant that you all paid for is the one that's keeping us in service. We did lose a large major sewer interceptor that served South Longmont. It was taken out by the flood across the St. Vrain. Our staff, again, we've been able to divert those flows, and they are going into other trunk systems and have recovered that. We certainly need to build the line. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. As Harold mentioned, the wastewater treatment plant, I can't say enough about our staff out there. They stayed on that site until the water was breaching and coming in around them. And they were also smart, though. They got out, they were all safe. They also left the plant in a mode that they knew they could get it started up. I think it's part miracle, part great work, but the plant is back in operation and we're meeting permit limits. As you know, around the town, we've had numerous roadways that have been breached and bridges that have been compromised, and those are going to take months and months to repair. We're trying to minimize the impact that we can, and I think so far we've done a pretty good job. We've also had many parks damaged in our community. The St. Vrain Greenway is gone, and I stress everyone to please stay away from the St. Vrain Greenway. It's very dangerous down there. It's a dangerous place, and so please stay away. But parks like Kanemoto Park, the pool is gone. Parks like Valley Park are devastated. Left Hand Creek Park are devastated. Sandstone Park, District Park, many of them, and it's going to take time and resources for us to rebuild those. This is one of our projects that we worked on, and I want to very purposely thank the private property owner whose property we're working on here. His name is Jim Hepp, excuse me, and he was in Wyoming, and he gave us approval to come in on a phone call. We also, on a phone call with the Army Corps of Engineers, got approval for permitting to do this immediately, even ahead of the permit being issued out, and the regulatory people on the line. So we had our mayor and our mayor pro tem with us, and thank you, and thank everybody on the city council. I think it took us being there united, and I think the Corps of Engineers knew that we had an idea. And frankly, it was Ken Hewson, our water resources engineer, that came up with this idea after flying over the river. He said, I think I have a place where we can get the river back into the channel. And we honestly didn't know if it would work, but we knew we had to act. We had water going through neighborhoods in our city. And so this is the contractor working just yesterday getting the second channel opened. And I'm happy to say the water is down. We're no longer bringing water into any of the neighborhoods of the city, but much more work is going to be needed. This is an aerial view of that. You can see the backhoe is working. We also worked very closely with our Boulder County commissioners, and I want to thank them for their support. That's Boulder County open space property that we're digging that channel on, and that's a Boulder County road, Hygiene Road, that quite frankly was a road that hadn't been washed out by the river, and we dug through it. We had to, and that has, I think, stopped the water into our neighborhoods. As I said earlier, I'm really pleading that all Longmont residents and businesses please stop all outdoor watering until further notice, until we can give an all clear that our water supply is at a point where we're able to put supply out on the lawn. You know, frankly, the good news is we've had 5 or 6 inches of rain in the city, and your lawns probably don't need any water for a while. So long term, for us, this is going to be months to years of recovery. Our work is just beginning, and will continue for a long time. This is the picture of Longmont Dam. How many people have ever been up to Button Rock and seen Longmont Dam? I don't know if you can see it in the picture there, but that's it. That's the flood going over the dam. Longmont Dam was built back in the 1920s, and it held through this flood. Unfortunately, Longmont Reservoir is completely full of silt, so we're unable to divert out of the St. Vrain at this point. This is one of our biggest challenges on water supply, to get this reestablished. The St. Vrain represents about 2/3 of the city's water supply, so we're down to 1/3. This is a picture of St. Vrain Bridge. It's just one of many bridges in the city that are going to need major rehabilitation work as we go forward. This happens to be one that we will be working in partnership with Boulder County on. I'd like to say it's their bridge, but frankly, Longmont residents use it, and I think we need to work together on it. This is another picture of the bridge during the flood. This is what happened south of the Sunset Street Bridge. You see the power pole. The road is gone. The river is rechannelized outside of where the bridge is. It's going to take a lot of time and effort to get the channel to go back under the bridge. This is a picture of Ralph Price Reservoir at the upper end of the reservoir. A couple of things in this picture. You'll notice the color of the water. I have never seen the reservoir look this way. I don't think the reservoir's looked this way since it was built in 1969. It's chocolate brown all the way down to the outlet. I'm concerned about that. We've got to get the silt to settle out before we could ever treat it. And this upper end, the darker color, this doesn't really work, is trees and debris that has filled the upper end of the reservoir. It's going to take a phenomenal effort for us to get those out. And that's made more difficult by the fact that we can't get any vehicles in there because the roads are all washed out to the reservoir. Our only way in is by helicopter or by four-wheel drive over the Hall open space and into the city open space. I'm concerned about that. We are figuring that out. We will figure that out. But it's going to be a phenomenal effort to get the roads rebuilt, not only US 36, but County Road 80. Oops. Well, it doesn't want to stay there, so it won't. I'm trying to show our city parks facility. This is what it looks like after the flood. The flood waters were probably up about 3 or 4 feet on the side of the building, so we've had to abandon that facility at this point. We've relocated our parks staff. I think Kim told me today she's in about, her staff and Bob's staff are in about 3 different buildings around the city. And so we're going to build teams in different ways around our department now. We're going to have our new partners in our buildings. This is some inside shots, which frankly, at these shots are shots that hundreds of homeowners could also show us about their homes. Many, maybe even worse than this. So this is Weld County Road 1 out east of Longmont. Again, it's a road that's out in the county. It's outside the city limits. But it's a major thoroughfare that Longmont residents rely on to get to work, to get to where they need to go. And it's completely breached on both sides of the bridge. It's going to take a phenomenal effort to get that road reopened as well. So park closures, as I mentioned, I don't know why this is doing that. Numerous parks are closed. I'm not going to read through all of them, but they're on our website. If they're closed, they're going to be marked as closed. They're going to be fenced off. And again, I plead with people, please stay out of those parks. They're dangerous. We're closing them for a reason. We don't want anyone hurt. So efforts which helped our responses, which I'm thankful for. As Harold mentioned, some of the major drainage projects that you, the voters of Longmont, approved with the bond issue several years ago. We completed our Left-Hand Creek project, I think, just this spring. And I never thought we would need it this soon, but we did. And the floodplain mapping, I told Harold when we were up in the helicopter looking, I said I took a map with me because I was going to mark where the water was compared to where our mapping thought it would be, our floodplain mapping. And I told him I don't need to because it's drawn almost exactly the way the city's floodplain maps were showing, with the exception of a huge issue on the west side of the city where the river decided to take its own course. We've worked very closely with Dan and his staff on our emergency preparedness and public works, and across the city, LPC, all departments are involved in that. And so with that, what I'd leave you with is that this is going to be many months of work, probably years of work. Our recovery will be long and hard. It will be challenging at times. And at this point, we don't have all the answers on what it's going to take to get everything back to where it needs to be, and everything where our citizens need help and where they're going to need help reestablishing their homes and getting back into their homes, which I think is a big focus of our city staff to assist it any way that we can. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mayor Coombs.
Thank you, Dale. I'd like to also thank Governor Hickenlooper for making a trip out here to Longmont, and also our Congressman Corey Gardner came out here and spent some time with us. He brought his staff, and I see he's got a representative. Dan Betts is here, and we also have our state senator, Matt Jones, and state representative Jonathan Singer. So thank you all for supporting us. I feel like the city of Longmont is not alone in this. We've got plenty of support. And, we're going to work collaboratively with Boulder and Boulder County. And I just want to thank everybody for coming out here tonight. And there's not going to be a formal answer and question period, but we're all going to hang out here, and you feel free to come up and ask us questions. So thank you so much for coming, and I appreciate all that the city has and you citizens have done for us, so thank you.